Welcome back to Liquidity and Liquor. Scott and Yosef here. Today we're talking about the biggest mistakes you're going to make when you fire people. So
Yes.
what do you got in mind?
So when you
start.
I like to talk about firing because if there's one thing you hate doing when you run a company, when you're an entrepreneur, it comes to the point where you have to start letting people go.
And everyone has to do this.
Everyone has to. It can be for multiple reasons. The only time you don't feel bad is when the person really deserves it. You call them stealing. You don't feel that guilt, but you have to let people go. That's part of a business, and no matter where you come from, if you run a business and you're like, I'm not going to fire people, then don't start a business. You're going to have to do it. You have to be good at this, and you have to actually be better than your competition, because the ones that are going to win, mainly it's because of the ones that just let the people, the ones that shouldn't stay, are being churned faster. That you're going to win like that. That's just the way you can win. In one way to win, right? There are many, many ways, but
because you'll never be perfect at hiring. Hiring is one of the hardest things to do.
100%.
Hiring is virtually like it's impossible to get it right.
There's never perfection in hiring. Yeah, it's never perfection. But then you keep the right people. It's easier to create a camaraderie where everyone can align together. It's not about the size of your company. Don't brag when you say I have already 100 people or 1,000. Like, no, don't ever brag about that. It should not be like this. Ask yourself the question: are we firing fast enough? If you run into 6 months, 8 months, you have about 100, 200 people, and it's been 3 months, 4 months that you haven't fired anyone, know that you're doing something wrong. I know it sounds bad, it's politically wrong and all that, but listen, like your body, get rid of cells. Every 84 days, you're a completely different human being. All the cells in your body are completely different. It's time to let go certain people. Why? Because you open up the opportunities for others. Now, it doesn't have to be like the way that Amazon does it, 10%, the bottom 10% every 6 months. I'm not telling you to go so draconian, but if you haven't let anyone go, that means there is a department where some of the managers are letting some things slide when you're at a certain size.
And you have to have the KPIs in place to know what who those people are.
You have to figure it out, and you have to learn to put a particular structure in place and let people understand that if there is a problem in your department, I'll let you go and blame once or twice someone underneath you, but eventually it's your fault.
Yeah.
So you have to be the one that let those people go. Now,
and by the way, managers should also be empowered to let people go and let them know that it's not okay to let poor performance slide in a department and don't cover up. It's like it doesn't hurt anyone. And the funny thing is, when you don't fire somebody, you're actually hurting the person who you're not firing more. And I believe this 1,000%. And if people have been fired and it sucks, and you're gonna say, Scott, you're an asshole, I don't really care, because everyone who I've ever let go has ended up in a better spot, doing something they're better suited for, and have accelerated their career.
If you're letting a person go in the right way,
and it doesn't mean you just throw them out into the water and forget about them. There's ways to do this that you can actually help them.
Many times we would go and find another job before, but I will say that sometimes for the preservation of your business, some people are difficult. They come in. Usually the worst performers are the ones that are going to also sue you while they're at work, while they're outside at work, just because they're looking for opportunities that are outside of working actually and producing. So sometimes you just have to be quiet. In Florida, it's the right to, I think, what's the right term for it? I think it's the right to work state, which means you can put a non-compete on anyone if they're just an employee. There are different conditions, but just employees, you cannot put non-compete. However, you do not have to disclose why you let someone go.
Yeah.
And it's actually good for you if someone tells you why I let you go, so I can give you a feedback so you can be better next time. But if I don't trust you and I think you're going to sue me, I'm not going to let you know, because that's when it's going to come back and bite me in the ass.
That's why as an entrepreneur, you got to think about where you're starting your business too.
Correct.
So there's two sides to this coin. We're talking about employees and getting fired, which is horrible. As an entrepreneur, that's why you shouldn't have a business in California anymore.
Oh.
Don't have a business in California. If you can avoid it, it's not good.
Yeah, you can hire them, but you can't fire them. That's I wanted to go back to the main topic, is how to let people go. So
I have some tips. Do you want to go with yours?
Yeah, well, I will start with one bigger scenario.
Yeah.
Especially now, because we're talking recession, and the reason we bring it back in. Sometimes there are mass layoffs for, say, 10, 20%, where you have to let them go because just the business is not what it used to be. And that's a tough part. Because It's not like they did something wrong. It's not the company's fault sometimes. It's just the way things are, right? And you gotta let people go. And the question is, how do you keep the morale? So if you do the first run of layoffs, you're gonna be forgiven if you say, well, we have, say, 1,000 employees, but we have to let 100 go because we have to restructure the business. We have to be more efficient, more lean, like we spoke in our last podcast. Got to be turning profit again and so on. Economy doesn't look good in the future. We want to make sure that whoever stays, we want to protect you guys. And the mistake most founders do, or not founders or CEOs, is that they let go not enough people in the first round, and then it lead them to the second round of like layoffs. And that's where people don't trust. It's very bad because after the first one, you know what, people are forgiven, but then comes the second one.
Yeah.
And that's where people don't trust that there's not going to be a third one, even if you're going to promise them again. So what you're going to see is a lot of good people leaving because they're shining their resume, they're sharpening their resume.
They think there's going to be a third and a fourth and a fifth.
They don't, yeah. So what ideally is that you say, well, if I think I need to let go, say 10%, I want to make sure then perhaps I need to lay off a little bit more because after that I have to make sure I don't do it again.
Yeah.
Because they need their security. And the second part is there is another opportunity where you can let people go and say, well, instead of doing, and that's another, I haven't done this, but well, I haven't done any of those because I never had to let people go for that reason. But I heard a very creative way where they say, instead of letting so many people go, if you have to do a second round, you can say, well, no, instead of you working, say, 40 hours a week, I'm going to let you all work, say, 32 hours a week. Mm-hmm. This way, we don't have to do any layoffs, but we can still stay in budget.
So these are more. This is
so
more
it's
about
going to be
budget.
A little bit different.
This is more about budget. I also want to talk about performance layoffs because I think that's an important thing too. So
yes.
Budget layoffs because of massive recession, massive revenue decline. That's a tough that's even harder.
This is a once every 5-10 years when those things happen, right? But it's important to know that once you get to that size, remember that once you have to let people go, you have to do it right, but do it once. And then move on from there. Make sure that you did structure your business good. And you know why it doesn't also work for a lot of companies is that they lay people off, but the initiatives that the companies are doing that are unsuccessful, they usually keep running them with just less people. So if you have like 3-4 different initiatives, one of them is your cash cow. When we were talking about Google, 80% of the revenue, 81% is their searches. Yeah. Everything else they're doing is just trying something new that eventually it's going to be their future, but it's not, right? Many companies have those, and so many of them are sucking all the resources, so they let a bunch of people go, but they don't kill those initiatives. And I've seen this before.
And that actually leads to people actually leaving because they're more stressed or overworked.
Yeah, you put them in the wrong initiative, part of the business. You have to also kill the wrong initiatives. Make sure that you really restructure the company, focus only on what's turning profit, and keep only the group that's there. Everything else that doesn't turn profit, it's time to shut down that department. And everyone else has to go there. No one has to stay in that department. You let those people go. Do not go and say everyone's headcount has to be shrinked by 10-20%, but those failure initiatives are going to stay. Then you're doing the same thing with just less people.
But now let's talk about performance. So when you're firing people, laying them off because they're not performing at their job, first of all, the number one thing that you always have to do is make sure that you are setting them up for success. So that is the most important thing. Like, you can't be setting someone up for failure and then firing them. That's the worst thing you could possibly do as a business leader. So success, KPIs, all the tools, resources that they need based on the job that they're going to be doing, these things have to be put in place. Mm-hmm. And if there's training programs and they aren't aware of or knowledgeable on certain parts of their job, you have to give them opportunities to learn those things, if that is the promise that you made with them. Now, if you made them a promise and they're not fulfilling the part of the deal and you have to lay them off, the layoff or the firing.
So this is the onboarding part.
This is the onboarding, but this is also...
We should talk about onboarding on another podcast.
That's going to be a whole other thing.
Yeah, it's a whole other... So you have to let them go now, okay? People that just poorly performed. How do you let them go?
It should never be a surprise. In my opinion, it should never be a surprise.
You don't think so?
No, because you should have the balls to speak to them about the performance.
Okay, so
before
here's
they
a
get laid
different.
off.
Here's a difference between. What is the difference in your opinion between a VP that's in your organization for 3 months, or a C-level? Let's just put even a C-level.
Okay.
3 months, badly performing, and say a coordinator. How would you approach it different? Both of them poorly performing 3 months in. What do you do?
You give. So I wouldn't give a VP or C-level any chance.
Exactly.
I wouldn't give them at all.
Yes.
Because I hired them because of their expertise.
Yes.
I hired them because they know more than me.
Exactly.
So if they lie to me, or the professional interviewers and all,
It's just I feel like they don't have the privilege.
They don't.
To get what a coordinator has, because a coordinator needs to be trained. Okay,
Yes,
even
correct.
manager needs to be trained. But
Correct.
if you're a C-level, there is a reason why there is a probation period. And if I don't find
3
that
months,
it's going to
that's it.
work, by those 3 months, if you stayed, it's my fault for keeping you.
I would still say that in those 3 months, if they're really dropping the ball, you're going to have at least one conversation with them.
At least one conversation.
At least
yes.
one.
Yes,
3
but
months
they
is
should
not-
understand that there is it didn't work out, and that.
And by the way, when you're hiring a VP or a C-level, they're putting together a strategic plan for their business unit or their department before they even get hired, most often. Like when I'm going into a C-level position, that CEO and that board is saying, what are you doing in the next 3, 6, 9, and 12 months, and then 3 year and 5 year? And then what resources you need
this
to
is a
accomplish
very
that.
corporate way. I don't know if everyone does that.
Fair, but the point is, the person should still have a plan. I need to. If I'm hiring somebody for over 100,000 or 150,000 or 200,000 or more, I need to know what they're doing in the
It
first
doesn't
3
always
months.
work for every business. I don't disagree. I don't disagree. I think that if you're looking at a traditional business, if it's, let's just say, gas pipeline or so on, everything is the same. Nothing has to be, okay, tell me how you're going to do it. But if you're looking at a very dynamic business, that a lot of things are just different. And also in the positions. That if you're looking at a finance position, it can be like that, but it's not going to be the same when you're looking at a marketer that tomorrow they come up with ChatGPT and it's like, well, I didn't have that on my plan, so we'll talk about this in 5 years.
No, I don't want to talk about 5 years. I want to talk about it now. But
Yeah.
okay, fine. So say you're dropping the ball. So I do believe at least one conversation with the person. But when you are terminating, like very basic things, like do it with an HR person or someone else in the room or on the Zoom call. I don't do one-on-one firings, and I rip the Band-Aid off immediately. So when you're actually in the conversation where you're firing somebody, you don't get to know them. You don't talk about their week. It's like that conversation is going to be traumatizing for that person. So you rip the Band-Aid off. You tell them that this is what you're doing. You're terminating. You give them the details. And then if you want to talk, they can ask questions, of course. And you can decide what you'd like to disclose. If they want to talk in more detail, I always suggest you'd separate that conversation and book another time in a day or something like that. Because that person in the moment is psychologically stressed out, and nothing good is going to come from that conversation. No saying, well, what if, or I'm going to try this, or I promise I'll do better. Like all that, you have to just kill that conversation. You've already made the decision. You got to stick to your guns, and you can help the person and you can help them with references. You can help them find the job, but that positive piece,
How do you get your people
I
that
feel like
needs
you have
to do the
separate it.
job of firing, so you don't have to be in every layoffs if you have somewhat of a tiered organization doing it right.
You have a checklist.
Right, you have a checklist.
Yeah.
You know, have you ever had some scenarios where you had some drama when someone had to be laid off?
Yeah, but not in the call. Always after the call. Because in the call, most people, when they're getting laid off, they actually aren't emotional in the call, outwardly emotional. They're getting laid off is
When
like
you say in the call, you mean in person?
in
but
person, or
in
I'm
person.
saying Zoom because
Yeah.
it just happened recently during COVID.
Okay, so
over
yeah,
Zoom.
because
But yes, in the person as well, in person in office. But in that moment, it's like the same feeling as like when you get dumped. It's like in the moment you're gonna kind of feel emotional. Some people like cry a little bit, like they're stressed out, very stressed out, because it's really not a fun situation. But the nastiness comes after. Like
many times it goes on
it's like
on Glassdoor. It goes everywhere. Yes,
the lawsuits. It's
Yes.
like it's like, you know, like when somebody dies, there's like stages of mourning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you lose a job, that part of your life is dying, and I actually believe there's psychological stages of mourning to that job.
Without scaring you guys, I mean, if you need to let someone go, you need to let someone go, right?
But the checklist is important because it makes it so you don't fuck anything up. You have the list. It's not an emotional conversation. It's not a personal conversation. It's this was what you have to do. You aren't hitting it. These are the things that we're going to do now to let you go, exit you out of the organization. still very supportive, don't have to hate each other, and I can help you with next job, next placement, reference, find you something. I have a network of people that are hiring. But in this conversation, we're going through this checklist, and you're not going to be part of this organization.
In most cases, when we let someone go that was a managerial position that was high enough, and we didn't want to hurt their feeling, because this is probably the toughest part. You let someone's mother or father go, and in my mind, I think that he's the hero for their children, or she, and she or he goes back home, feel defeated, and the kids, it just breaks my heart. And where I always found myself is prolonging the layoffs, giving another chance, and it's just not the right person, moving to another position, tried everything, and for the most part, it doesn't work.
This doesn't mean that they can't, this is not to be cold-hearted. If there's an opportunity and you actually strategically find a way to move them to another spot in the organization, obviously that's preferable, but not always.
Yeah, but when you ask yourself if you had the chance of hiring them to begin with, the answer was absolutely no, and you just feel bad, and the worst part is when they relocate for you. And you said, damn, that's a lot. And then you definitely give them longer time. And you just, when I let them go, I have to give them a big chunk of, because now they moved and they had to relocate their kids. And oh my God, it's just a mess. So that's why the last ones I'll hire are the ones that I have to relocate just in case it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It is so devastating. I mean, I can't imagine for them, but imagine if it's devastating for me. And I know what needs to get done, right? If you want to take the right decision, you have to take you have to take the emotions out. And one thing you always tell yourself is, business-wise, I never regret for laying off anyone, ever. You only regret for not laying them off soon enough. However, it is still a thing. It's just you're connected with a person for whatever amount of time. You feel like
you're a human being.
It's a human being, so it's hard.
With them.
So make sure that when you hire people, you're going to be mentally strong enough to let them go, because your business is going to be what pays the price, and eventually it's going to hurt so many other people with their children if the business suffers. And the higher they are in the organization, the more disruptive they are if they're not an A player.
Yeah.
Because a B player, remember, B's hires A's, hire A's, B's hire C's. Because anything at the same level of a B is a threat for them. Mm. So they're going to demise them and push them out. They don't want to see A's, they're a threat. B's are a threat, they want to see C's and D's. Your organization is going to start struggling, suffering, and you wouldn't understand why. And it is going to hurt so many others. And eventually you're going to have to lay off a lot of people. And it happens to so many of us. It's because that's just the way it is. So, but you keep learning this, you do the mistake again, you learn again, you get better again, and then you...
Yeah.
So it's a struggle. So this is a struggle with laying off people.
But it's one of the most important things you can learn as an entrepreneur or business owner.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Okay. That's it for today. If you enjoyed, please subscribe on YouTube. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can download and listen to it wherever you get your podcasts or on liquidityandliquor.com.